And action, and welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly, episode 130. It is 7th of June, 2021. Let's actually get started. In the PnP Weekly, we talk about the latest on Microsoft 365 areas, concentrating on the platform and non-platform topics. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a program manager in the Microsoft 365 platform areas. With me as a co-host is Waldek. Who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Waldek Mastykarz. I'm Cloud Developer Advocate for Microsoft 365. And today with us, a guest from the US, the man himself, Nikola Metulev. Welcome, Nikola.
Close enough. Thank you.
Do my best.
I loved it. It was great.
Hey.
Yes. Hi, I'm Nikola. I'm a software engineer on the Windows team, actually. So I'm happy to be here.
Yes, that may sound weird for people because everybody knows you as the Microsoft Graph guy, and you have even the giraffe at the back of your
giraffe guy. Yes.
Yeah.
I always keep it next to me. Just you never know when you're going to need it.
That's true. Yes, it's almost like a Superman suit. You just put it on and then start executing.
Well, I should have had it on all the time. It was like, whoosh, ta-da.
Well, I took it off with this. I thought it was more casual. That's why. Otherwise, I had it on right before this.
Yes, every single work-related call, always hearing it. Now, can you explain what that discussion is all about? So what is Microsoft, how does the Microsoft Graph relates on you? So what do you do?
Well, you know what? We're one Microsoft, right? Microsoft 365 includes Windows, includes Office, includes all kinds of things. My role at Microsoft is to work with the developer community and to find patterns and things where we could help the developer community, do things faster. How can they get accelerated and get started from, I have an idea and I want to implement my idea and not get stuck into the weeds of implementing authentication or trying to pull data in, how do I get, that out of the way so I can actually get my $1 million idea out there to all the millions of people. And that's kind of what I do and kind of what we try to do with my team.
And not $1 million, $1 billion, right? So
Yes, $1 billion. Exactly.
But an interesting thing, right? So you can like talking to devs, like there are 20 million challenges and platforms you can fix. Mm-hmm. Like why Graph?
Because Graph is the API for everything now, right? It includes APIs for Windows, includes APIs for Office, includes APIs for SharePoint, includes APIs for everything you can think of in M365. It does it. So we see it as if we enable Graph, all Graph developers, then it's helping everybody, including Windows developers. So that's kind of the approach that we take, is we help everybody. We're not focused just on a small sliver of developers that we kind of focus on in our organization. Just because we're on Microsoft, we want to make sure that everybody is handled, everyone is taken care of. And that's kind of what we approached our open source initiatives so far.
And it's been actually pretty widely adapted as well. So it's been going nicely. Of course, more adoption always welcome. So
always, yes.
Yeah, but before we go back on or more detailed on the Graph Toolkits, can you talk about your history? How did you end up in Microsoft? What did you do?
What did you
do to get here?
What did I do? I think I got lucky. I think that's what it is. I don't think it was anything special. I got recruited out of college, and I joined straight out of college into at the time was an evangelism organization. It was DP, and that was called DX. So my role was essentially just be an evangelist. Go and talk to students, go talk to people, go build demos. We built the demos for Build conferences. We went and traveled to all kinds of different conferences. We made videos, blog posts, all kinds of stuff. So my history has always been working with the community and kind of partnering with the community. I was never a traditional program manager or a software engineer, and I'm still not. It's just my title as software engineer. And my role has slowly evolved over the years to do different things. I've started with Windows 8 at the time, worked on Xbox One when it first came out. So I was an evangelist for Xbox One and worked with our Xbox One partners, app partners, building applications for Xbox. Then Windows 10 came around, so I was a Windows 10 sort of evangelist. We created the Windows Community Toolkit at the time, which was our first big open source project, which is now really big. And about a few years ago, I switched over to focus more on the graph, on Microsoft Graph. still in the same team, and we created the Microsoft Graph Toolkit at the time. So it's kind of been very boring, but kind of moved on many different things while still working on the exact same team. And I feel like I've been lucky to be on a team that has the flexibility to work on so many different things and kind of work with so many amazing people. And, it's just luck, honestly.
Yeah,
Cool.
That's actually quite a nice journey on seeing all of the different things, and I guess one of the reasons why you are kind of in the Microsoft Graph and Microsoft 365 areas is that the Windows is now part of the larger Microsoft 365. So it kind of makes sense that we're all in this bigger family. And anyway, I personally now I'm closing in the 15 years in Microsoft. There's more and more the one Microsoft mentality, which is really good. So it's not the classic picture of the organizations with the guns and everything else. I think that's going to go away, and it's gone away. So it's not as competitive. It's more partnerships nowadays, which is really, really cool.
Exactly. I think part of my organization in the Windows org, we have a thing that says pick an oar, basically meaning, help others. Don't kind of sit and watch. But if you think you can help, just grab an oar and just kind of go with them and go help them out. And I think that's how I see my role is go help wherever I can use my talents and my skills, kind of help others kind of be successful. And that's kind of what we do.
Cool. Now, related on the Graph Toolkit, how did you end up having that kind of an idea? Was it your own idea, or did somebody say to you that from a top down that, hey, we need to do this kind of controls?
It's interesting. It came from, I was working on the Windows Community Toolkit. And personally, I was kind of wanted to do something different. And I spoke with my GM at the time and said, hey, I kind of want to try something else. Do you have anything that, I could be kind of doing something else? And he said, well, the Microsoft Graph is now becoming pretty big, and let's see if there's something we can do and help there. Can you go and kind of work with the Microsoft Graph team and go figure out how can we help? So I went and I basically spoke with Ina and other folks in the Microsoft Graph team and said, hey, how can we help? What is it that we could do to kind of help you out and kind of bring our skills into this? And working on the Windows Community Toolkit, controls was kind of the main thing that we did. And kind of I went from that aspect from it. It's like, maybe I can do something similar there. So I talked to the Graph team. They pointed me to some partners. I talked to some partners. I talked to a bunch of MVPs and kind of tried getting feedback of what are some of the pain points that people are seeing with the Graph that intersect with the skills and capabilities that we have on my team. And it turned out that we always heard, authentication is not the easiest it could be. I want to get started faster with authentication. We love the existing controls that already exist, but they're in React right now and they're not functional. I wish something that worked with Angular. I wish something that worked with Vue. And I wish something that just worked out of the box. So they kind of fit into what I was already capable of doing and kind of what I wanted to do. So it was just like, okay, let's try this out. So we built the toolkit as a prototype early 2019, and we demoed it to the MVPs first, I think, at the MVP Summit. And we got really positive feedback for it. And that kind of gave us encouragement to kind of keep going. And we announced the preview at Build that year. We got even more positive encouragement from that. And then it was a full 1.0 release that same year, I think in September at Ignite, where we announced it. And ever since then, we've got more and more adoption and exponential adoption, in fact, and people have been loving it. So it feels like it's been a good bet on our end to kind of go with that. It seems like people want to do this. They like the flexibility and the easiness of the toolkit.
Absolutely. And you have the number one pain point, what I said, that comes up. We are having, for example, one-to-one discussions with one of the partners together with Waldek, and the number one thing that everybody comes up with is the authentication and the how difficult it is to make things happen. But how did you solve that? And there's some sort of a provider model.
You know what? I don't think I solved authentication at all. I don't think the solving authentication. We just took the 95, whatever, I'm making up a percentage here, but the majority of what people need from authentication, the code they need to write, we kind of just packaged it into a very nicely, we'll call a provider, where you just one line of code, you put on your page, the code where you would have to write anyway, we just put it on there, and then you put it on your page, It works for vast majority of people. That's all they need. Now, if you want to do more, if you want to do advanced, of course, you still use all the usual authentication libraries. But we build everything on top of MCell. We build everything on top of the existing authentication library. We just write all that code that developers would have to write themselves anyway, and we kind of abstract that away from them. It's that easy. We made the decision to abstract away how authentication works and how components work. So you don't have to think about like, how do I now get data into my components? How do I now call the graph? How do I know I'm authenticated? How do I know I need to sign in or sign out? So we made it so you just put a provider on your page, you put a component on the page, and they kind of magically know how to talk to each other, and they need to kind of call each other. And that actually worked pretty well right now. And we separated the two. So a developer, if they have authentication, they can still use the components. They just have to write a function that just tells the components how to get tokens. Or if you just want to use the authentication without the components, you can do that as well. So you can just start getting, you can put that one line of code to authenticate and call a method to get a token, or to get a graph, authenticate a graph client, and it's going to call that. And that was an early decision that worked really well, that made the toolkit even more flexible for a lot of developers, because we're seeing some developers just using the authentication providers because they just need authentication. They don't need the UI part of it. Yeah. And we're seeing people that are using components that already have authentication, they already implemented they did all the hard work, but they just want the components. They just want an agenda on the page. They just want a peel picker, and it just works really well. So we kind of focus on those type of scenarios, so you can quickly and easily add whatever they need from the toolkit without requiring everything, right?
Yeah. Now, related on that one, actually, that's a good point. This is, you kind of mentioned this already in the between the lines on your previous answer, but how does this now then relates on the Fluent components? Because the Fluent is the UX components and the buttons and everything else. So is this the competing set of controls? What is happening? This is so confusing. Yeah. So
no, the way we see the Graph Toolkit is built on top of the Fluent components, right? So you're using Fluent UI, and on top of that, you're using the Graph Toolkit. You don't have to use them at the same time, but they work best when they're used at the same time, just because the Graph Toolkit is built on top of the same UI and same design system as Fluent UI. And then in the future, we're actually even blurring the lines, not blurring, but we're actually working even closer together with the Fluent UI folks. In the past, there wasn't, because we're built on web components, we couldn't use the React Fluent UI components. But now that the Fluent team has built web components, we're working with them to actually build all of our components off of the Fluent UI web components. So now the same teaming will work, the same styles will work, and everything will be exactly the same. So you use Fluent UI, and then you just add a toolkit component and you style it the exact same way. It's built on top of the exact same components. And the way we see ourselves is we look at the functionality we bring as part of the toolkit, not the UI components themselves. Like there's all these components that the Fluent UI provides that don't need to be functional. We provide the more complex functional parts of that people need, patterns that people need inside their applications.
Makes perfect sense. So it's not a competing set of controls. It's an abstraction, again, additional abstraction, which is using the Fluent inside of it. So exactly, yeah, makes perfect sense. Cool. Now, how do you, so of course the graph surface is massive. So we can imagine from a community perspective and customer partner perspective that you probably have a set of controls, like 50, 60 roadmap controls available in the backend. How do you prioritize all of this? How do you come up with where are we investing first or second or third?
Most of our work has currently been prioritized by the work we do with the community and the ISVs. Partners. So the way we work with partners is we go and talk to them with like, what would they need? And if there's something that they need that we don't have in the toolkit, we prioritize that first. And the way we prioritize it, we can only build it if we can build it in a way that can be used by everybody. We're not going to build a control that's super specific for a specific scenario. We're only going to build a component that works for everybody. We're not going to build this little widget that I need in my application that does this very specific thing. We're not going to build anything like that. But if somebody needs like a file list, recently was asked a few months ago, we said, well, yeah, we can see a lot of people needing a file list. We can see this being styled. We see this being customized to be fit into different scenarios. We'll go ahead and build this component and kind of help everybody. We also work with the community. The community goes on our issues and they suggest components, and we talk to them and we figure out, hey, what is it that, how do you see this component being used by other developers? Is this something that only you need, or do you see others needing this? And then we ask others to come in and contribute to that discussion and say, hey, do others need this? And if we see a signal that this is something that more than a handful of people need this, then we'll go ahead and invest in it, or we'll work with the community to build it. We are open source in a way, not, we build things in the open, but we work with the community. So we encourage the community to come in and build components with us. To kind of do that, kind of work in partnership with them and figure out like, how can we kind of figure this out together?
So it's not just source open, it is actually open source. So
exactly,
you are truly accepting contributions from the community. So.
Yes, even features. Like if somebody wants to come in and say, hey, I want to build this thing that's been proposed, is that okay? I mean, like usually, yes, absolutely. Like we're completely open to it.
And with that, I want to ask, so have you always built open source, or have you also built non-open source things in the past, and open source is just, let's say, the last few years, Nikola?
For all the production stuff that I've built, has always been open source. I think we've always started open source. We've contributed code closed source to Windows. We've contributed code to other projects. We've contributed code to partners which have closed source. But for the work that we do, it's always been open source because we like to scale things. Everything we build, we want to have an impact across the entire community, and we don't want to have something that's only for a specific thing, right? Unless it's going to help everybody. Mm-hmm. Our motto has always been, incubate with a partner or a small community member, but scale it across everything. If you can't scale it, don't even incubate it, right? Always try to kind of think of it, how can we scale this across everybody?
Right. And so because the reason I asked is like different folks who come from different backgrounds have different experiences with open source. And like many folks start really in their sheer passion, like, yeah, let's do open source. And then they're like, oh yeah, but there's like random people submitting issues. There are PRs and we need to do something about, or we have to have opinion or things, right? So, and it pretty quickly becomes the reality that it requires a mindset. It requires like basically
resources, time.
Yes, and also like you need to give it like it has to be a place. It cannot be afterthought. So that I wonder, like, has that always been a part of the way you work, or is it something that you have learned gradually over time as you went working on MGT?
You know what? It's something that we've learned over time. Our approach has we never really thought about the future in the past. I don't know if that makes sense. As evangelists, you kind of think in the moment. It's like, what is this thing I can build right now and kind of get people to use? And obviously, you kind of push things to GitHub. You push a sample to GitHub. You push whatever to GitHub. And when our first big project was the Windows Community Toolkit, we first started going open source. We didn't have any experience with actually maintaining a project. We didn't have any experience with having an open source project. And we learned a lot from that, working with the community and working with, I think we had several MVPs early on before we went public, kind of gave us feedback. It was like, hey, we want to do this open source. We want to do this completely with everybody. We want to include you into this process. And that helped us learn a lot. We made a lot of mistakes, obviously, and we still make mistakes constantly, but we're learning.
That's the being human part of it, right?
Right.
So
exactly. But we're learning, and we're trying to. If we make a mistake, we're trying to change, and we're trying to kind of adopt and do what it is. But I'm really proud of the work we did with open source because we were probably one of the first open source projects from the Windows side when the Windows Community Toolkit first came out, and which encouraged others once they saw the success of what open source can do and how much interaction you can get with the community, to encourage other projects in Windows org to start going open source and starting to kind of adopt that same model. But this is something that Microsoft started doing this even before we did. Like we weren't the first one in Microsoft. So like the .NET team and everybody else did this a long time ago. So there was a lot of ones we can look at and kind of take inspiration from, like, what are they doing? What can we do? So it was a lot of, learning. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Any actually related on that one? Any good learnings which you want to call out, which were maybe a surprise related on the open source? Anything? What comes to mind?
Being responsive, I don't know if it's a surprise or anything, but being responsive and being nice and asking questions, it's something that we're not that, we weren't that used to at Microsoft. I think having that two-way conversation before, it was really hard. Like before, we were used to kind of just leaving something out there and kind of say, hey, we built this thing, go use it, or check this out, or go do it. But having that two-way conversation and getting used to be very responsive and being open to criticism by the community, it was something that took getting used to for a bit, I think. Yeah. It's something that I wasn't really expecting, because when you do this and you're not really expecting what to happen, you just, I'm going to leave this out there and see what happens. Yes, that took a while. The time it takes to build something in the open versus to build it, closed is much. It requires more time. It requires more commitment and requires more focus. It's a whole different way of kind of building things, and it's something that's been hard for our leadership to also understand. It's like, hey, you're working with the community. The community is going to do this work. It's fine. You don't need to do this work. And that took some time to kind of get even our leadership to kind of understand that it's like, no, it's actually more work working with the community. It's more time commitment, but it's worth it because we get back so much from doing that and spending, putting that investment into the work that we do with the community.
Yeah. And then whatever you actually deliver matches their expectation, because it's actually coming from them rather than somebody sitting in an office and saying, all of the customers should be having this. And then, is it really true or not?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but that's actually the good point related on the feedback and being open for negative feedback as well, because that's is certainly something which we've seen with all of the community work what you're having, and you really need to grow a thick skin as well, because it's not personal. It's just when you do stuff as an open source and with community, there's a lot of anonymous accounts which come and just plainly try that they're trolls. They're trying to just have fun. On your cost. So
well, and also I guess that with GitHub in place, I think that really commoditized like the ease with which people can criticize, submit feedback, issues, and at times people have bad days and they will react to it by submitting an issue. Whereas in the past, like if they would have to go through 20 hoops, they're like by the time they were there, they would be like calm down. It's like, okay, this is not a bad thing. Maybe but now it's like, let me just send this thing. Boom. It's like, oh, it's out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's exactly right. And the best thing we can do is just be calm and always kind of respond with respect. I think that's the biggest thing, is just respect. And no matter where the people are coming from, is just treat everybody with respect as a maintainer, and kind of say, hey, I'm sorry about this. How can we make this better? And kind of go from there.
Because it's not really, at least how I always approach this is that it's never a personal thing. They have a bad day, they have a bad feeling, they have something, and yes, they might even call you out on a name. But then the easiest way to calm people down is to ask and apologize, because me apologizing is not a way from me. It's just clearly the person subjectively is being hurt, so apologizing is not a bad thing. And then asking, how can we help? So
it's what you said, being human, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, let's jump on the articles and then come back on a discussion after that. So let's go through some of the news, what has happened throughout the week. We didn't actually have news from the Teams marketing this week, so there's no news from the Teams blog. But SharePoint released their May 2021 update on the first day of June. But anyway, so that was Monday. So I guess that's understandable after the build and everything else. But there's a good discussion with Jokesh. He's one of the migration PMs, principal program manager on the migration side. So good discussion on that, and a lot of let's say improvements on the SharePoint side. And as we can see from here, it starts with the Yammer conversation insights. So a lot of this stuff is getting now more and more merged across the organizations as well. So it's not precisely maybe the backend is SharePoint or maybe the backend in Teams, but then it's being surfaced in multiple locations, which I think it's a really, really good thing. OneDrive as a good example, and then Graph Toolkit as an example has a file explorer, right? Is that the right file picker?
File list.
File list.
File list,
okay.
yes.
Yes, that's what it is. But it's a good example of how things are getting kind of emerged, hopefully as a one Microsoft story externally. What do we have here? External sharing in lists, improvements in there, recommended files in Office for Windows and Microsoft 365. We're already on the side, the supported things, a lot of on admin side as well, and a lot of updates on the related technology in the build. Right now, as it's like 2 weeks after build, not a massive amount of new announcements. Few teasers. Power Apps can now display images in Microsoft List, and the SharePoint Admin Center homepage insights dashboards is coming over there, and a lot of additional links.
Tell everyone.
Yes, tell everyone. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. Now, and this one is really cool from Matt Chrysler. I helped a bit on the video side, not too much because Matt had done that already. But he likes to spend time on the mountain, but he also owns the Sharepoint Spaces, which is the 3D way of approaching information, which, by the way, are working now with Microsoft Teams on the potential meeting stuff and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of interesting visions related on this. But this is basically a story related on how you could actually have a virtual tour experience with Sharepoint Spaces in the 360 tour web part. So how to build cool experiences with that side. And I think these pictures are from himself. So basically, as he's been skiing in the mountains, it's pretty cool.
8K images in SharePoint Spaces.
It did say that 8K images in SharePoint Spaces. Yeah, that is true. Migrate content from Box, Dropbox, Google Workspace to Microsoft 365 release updates. So there's updates related on the migration manager in the SharePoint Admin Center. So you can actually manage your migration directly from the Admin Center, which is really cool. You can see actually the status and all of that. So a lot of investments and improvements in here as well for making it easier for people to migrate on the Microsoft 365. Now, this one, scroll up, deep dive on Viva Learning at the Learning Transformation Briefing. So update on the Viva Learning. It's still I think it's in private preview, and it's not available yet even for a preview. So a selected group of partners are able to get there. And then this is basically an update on what's happening on the Viva Learning and the partners and some feedback from them. Now, maximizing results with collaborative work management in Microsoft 365. That's a interesting title. Really impressive title, isn't it? But a lot of basically a summary on the different tooling and how do you actually work and focusing more on the value of the solutions and working ways of doing it rather than the products, which is a good thing. I think this is a natural direction where we're heading with Microsoft Viva. So we don't talk about the explicit products necessarily anymore. We talk about more on what does it do for you in the day-to-day work, which is really, really good. So cool stuff related on the different leaflets,
images, solutions,
basically
infographics.
Thank you. So a lot of different kind of infographics as well now available around this stuff. Now, choose the right Microsoft tool for managing your work. Again, similar kind of message. So what to do where, as an example. So what's the difference between Task App, Planner, and To-Do versus Planner, List, and Project? So when to choose what? And I think these are really good because quite often we get the question on why are you releasing competing products, which we don't really
Teams
use.
Versus Yammer versus Outlook. Email.
Yeah. There is a reason and there's a kind of a primary objective for all of them, and some of the features are overlapping as well for sure. It's like To-Do and Planner and Tasks. Which, anyway, not going to read that one. Now, on the Microsoft 365 developer blog, change notification extended for federated chats. So updates on that one on the Microsoft Graph side of the house, so really cool as well. So this follow up on the previous announcement. Then there was a universal actions in adaptive cards on Microsoft Teams, and basically aligning the Outlook and Teams on the action. We actually did have a demo on this one in a relative, what was it? It was in the May Microsoft Teams community call as well. So which was explaining this and covering things as well. This was basically officially then announced in build and demonstrated there. Getting started with Graph API with Spfx Reports from Chandani. Chandani has been blogging quite nicely actually in the Microsoft 365 Bmp blog, and this is really focusing on how do you do things, how do you first test out how things are working in the Graph Toolkit, how to solve the permissions, which is one thing which might be always a difficult thing to do. What are the permissions needed for this API? And then how do you implement the things, and how do you write the code to hit the Graph APIs? So that's cool. Now, in the Microsoft Graph blog post, in a slightly different order now, announcement file components MSAL2 provider SharePoint framework library for Microsoft Graph Toolkit. This is the 2.2 release, wasn't it?
What is that?
Exactly. Who wrote this? What is this stuff? So, but this is the few weeks back, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit 2.2, isn't it? Or 2? What is
2.2?
it?
Yeah, no, it's 2.2.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a new update, 2.2. It's actually the biggest update I think we've ever had because it has so many new things. The MSAL2 provider, which is using MSAL browser behind the scenes now, something that was requested heavily by the community, uses a much more secure way to authenticate in single-page applications. It also enables things like SSO. So if I'm authenticating on the back end and I want to use the Graph Toolkit component on the front end, I can use SSO to sign in on the front end as well. And then I can just call the Graph directly from my front end without having to go through my back end to do that. Also adds the new file components, which are also very heavily requested, like the file and the file list. So you can just add a mgt-file-list.
Yep.
And it will pull in your OneDrive files or your SharePoint files or your shared files or your Insight files, whatever it is. And you can do whatever you want to do with that. And then another big one is the SharePoint library, thanks to Waldek, actually, who built this. Which fixes the issue of if you have multiple web parts that use the Graph Toolkit on a page, they actually conflicted with each other. And by using the SharePoint Framework Library, now you can actually have a shared MGT instance that can be used across multiple web parts. So they all use the same instance. So it also saves, space. How big your web parts are, because you're not shipping the toolkit with your web part, and you're using one that's already installed on that SharePoint page.
Yeah,
a lot of good stuff.
Perfect.
Really cool stuff. I can't wait for people to play with this.
So what's gonna let's talk about that one after the article. So what's gonna happen next? But now, quick recap on the other articles. Sample script quickly remove pending SharePoint API permission requests. So basically, if you have pending Graph API requests, how can you clean up that pending requests using CLI for Microsoft 365? So good summary on that one from this guy called Waldek. So using SPA core library with Chest from Marcin Wojciechowski from Valo. So basically, how do you do testing? Here we are having a discussion around the unit testing learnings. What he has, he's a really awesome developer, and how can we improve that within the product and also externally for the third party. Now, earlier today, Bert Jansen released the new version 1.12 on the Bmp Core Sdk. Basically, it's a wrapper on the Graph and SharePoint REST API. So this is basically intended to make it easier for classic SharePoint solutions, which are using SharePoint REST API or CSAM APIs to start transforming to use Microsoft Graph. So making it easier for basically abstraction layer on top of those APIs. So everything is about abstraction layers, right? So, and how many abstraction layers we actually built. So all of them. We kind of built all of them. Now, this is from Bijay Kumar, Spfx Watch Color UI Fabric Control example. So basically, how do you build this kind of a sample and update then the color, the buttons and the colors based on that theming? So a quick blog post on that one. Alex Sadomolex had a blog post related on issue with BMP.js SP site exists call when the page URL contains hashes. And this is basically when you're using SPFX, one of the super widely used components and JavaScript libraries in PS is BMP.js, and then a blog post related on a potential issue there and how do you work around on that. So how do you solve if the site exists or site doesn't exist? So basically the whole point on there. And then Elio had a blog post related on DevHack, get the shared file info for Microsoft Graph. So how do you get that information and how do you make things happen? So in here, Peter Winstra had a blog post with a fancy picture. Power Automate approvals on Dataverse. So how did that works? Cool graphics. Apparently, they're, by the way, doing a sequel on this new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's in works.
Gremlins,
yes. I think even Spielberg is still involved in that. So I don't know when it's actually scheduled, but now that I saw that one, I'm curious. I saw a message on that. Anyway, so Dataverse and Power Automate approvals, getting distracted on the pictures. And then the last one from the Recording 365 from Daniel and Daryl around the custom backgrounds for Microsoft Teams Together mode, which is the classic discussion point has been from a day one that whenever we get this, somebody's going to build the Muppet show. And of course, it has been built. Now, technically, we cannot really promote the Muppet show background because there's some copyright thing but of course community can actually do those things. So I don't think Microsoft is going to release that kind of a background, but you can build your own, which is really cool. The thing is, this one I don't understand. How do you duplicate yourself into Golda? So that's pretty cool.
I think they're using maybe a program called Photoshop.
That could be it. I've heard about that one. So,
or two cameras, or lookalikes, or OBS.
There's multiple ways of doing this. That's true. Anyway, so that's from the articles. Now, Nikola, I already asked that almost during the article. So what's going to happen next for the Graph Toolkit?
What's so much? I can ask the community to tell us what they want to see in there, but I'll tell you what we're kind of thinking of and what the roadmap looks like for the next 6 months at least. The big thing that the new MSL2 provider has enabled us to do now is to enable to support multiple accounts, and something I'm really excited about. So we have actually a preview of a login component that enables multiple users to sign in at the same time in application. And if folks want to know about that, they can kind of reach out to me on Twitter, and then I'll point you to the right branches to do that. But it's really cool. Like, you don't have to do anything else. Just use the new login component, and then you can sign in as many users' account as you want on your application. Something that was really, really hard before to do.
Similar like in the Azure portal, you can flip between the accounts. And
if you have a personal account, you have an enterprise account, you have an educational account, or you have a million accounts, you can switch between them. The components will automatically refresh when you switch between the accounts. It's really magical. It's in preview. We still have some work to do on that one. It's also breaking change, so we're hesitant putting it into 2x right now. So it'll likely come in 3.0. Speaking of, I mentioned earlier that the Fluent UI team has released web components, Fluent UI web components. So our big investment for the next, I want to say 6 months at least, is going to be adopting those new Fluent UI web components and building the entire toolkit on top of those Fluent UI web components. That's going to make it really more cohesive with the Fluent UI system. So for folks that are using Fluent UI and the web components, it will be just as if you're using the Fluent UI web components, which is the same thing. It's going to be a big investment that we're doing. It's going to require us to rewrite a lot of different things to kind of adopt those things, but it's going to make it really faster for us to build new components. Because before, we had to write our own components. We had to write all the small little things. We had to write an input box, we had to write a button, we had to write all the different things that didn't exist. Now that Fluent UI web components exist, we can move much faster to iterate and build new components on top of that. Of course, we're going to continue working on new components. There was a suggestion by Waldek, actually, for a new file upload component. And there's interest from the community. Sounds like that somebody wants to implement or at least work on a spec. So we're kind of pushing that through, and hopefully we're going to see something like that in the future. File picker, and other things I can't think of right now, but there's a huge list. If folks want to go to our repository and our issues, they'll find a huge list of things that are currently being worked on or we want to work on. We also have a list of issues that people might want to pick up themselves. So if people search for help wanted or good first issues, we have a bunch of those for folks to kind of pick up and kind of work on things with us and kind of just hang out with us and, stay in the issues or hang out with us, ask questions, chat. We're kind of lonely working by ourselves sometimes, so it's good to kind of have friends.
Absolutely. And the easiest way to find Microsoft Graph Toolkit is with the AKMS address.
ak.ms/mgt, Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
That's really, really is a way to find the relevant repo, and then from there there's additional links for all of the things and issues and pull requests and the playgrounds and documentation and a lot of additional stuff. Now, just for the final questions, anything interesting happening this week? What are we working on this week?
Ooh, I forgot to mention we have a new Teams SSO provider. That's what we're working on this week. See, that's what's happening this week.
That's been a long one coming, yeah.
Yeah, Simon from the community has been working on a Teams SSO provider, and he's had a PR up for a while actually. So I'm sorry, Simon, I've been too busy to review it.
Is that Simon Okrin or
Simon Okrin? Yes,
Simon Okrin. Cool.
I've been too busy to review it because of build, but now that build is over, I finally have time. I'm really excited to review the Teams SSO PR, which is going to enable folks to use SSO in their Teams tabs as a provider, which is really, really cool. So that's on me.
Yep. That's really cool.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah. What about you, Waldek? Anything interesting happening this week?
In comparison, no.
Not as interesting.
I don't know if people understand this, but Waldek does so much during the week. I think the stuff that you do in a week, it takes me a month to kind of accomplish. So I really, really doubt that.
No, so actually, what have we done? So we have updated recently the Learn for MGT 2.2. We have updated the docs where we documented the required scopes for MGT, so that it's easier for you to decide or know even which scopes you need up front if you want to do pre-consent. Other than that, what's coming? We're going to work on new version of CLI. We're working on a new idea that allows you to basically pass a blob of HTML to it, and CLI would gives you an SPPKG with a web part. So kind of a different way of embedding. Yeah, so that if all you want to do is embed a Bing Maps on your web page, right? Like you don't need to install Yeoman and Gulp and Toolkit and fiddle with JavaScript and TypeScript and building. And no, you want to you get a piece of HTML from somewhere, pass it onto CLI, and get out of a package that you can then give to your admin to install in tenant.
Cool.
That is so cool. I love that type of thing. Makes it really easy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so and also so including that, like we want to also ensure that people will be able to use things like MGT, where there's like additional script you need to load on time. So it's just not like the basic HTML things like iframe, but also having the ability to access things like the context of the page or the context of Teams and tap into that, and also including MGT. So all of that is coming hopefully soon.
Oh, that sounds so cool.
That's really, really cool. And now, anyway, so on our side, I think the big focus continues for SharePoint Framework and the ODSP especially is the Viva Connection. So Viva Connection is in preview. We have already 350 people sign up for the preview, which is just the overhead of actually controlling the preview access is getting out of control. But it's a positive outcome, right? So more people being excited on that and building mobile experiences, native mobile experiences rendered in native React format directly in the Microsoft Teams. So that's really, really cool for sure. And then what else is happening? On community side, 2 community calls, a lot of stuff happening over there. I also actually booked my summer vacation earlier today, which is really, really good. So
Can I come?
Right?
Sorry, what?
5 months, right? Away.
Yeah, 5 months. Yeah, that's right.
No, European
to
vacations.
Be fair,
yes.
I was thinking this earlier today. One thing what I actually realized, I'm closing to 15 years in Microsoft, and this is the first time actually I'm booking a proper European summer vacation and without feeling, let's say, threatened of losing my job because of that. So, which is weird. It's the imposter syndrome because you're always like afraid of, but I'm not good enough. And I think a lot of the IT people have the same problem. And it doesn't matter how many years you've been in Microsoft, you'll never get rid of it. But now I was just thinking this, the first time ever, to be fair, with a supportive manager as well, people are being told to actually take time off, which is really good. So it's been a tough year for many, many reasons for many people. So having some time off and vacation and focusing on family is a good thing so that everybody can focus then on execution on autumn, which is good.
Your well-being is number one, so you need to take care of yourself to take care of others. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely. So, and for those who are watching and listening, Remember that. That's a really well said. But thank you, Nikola, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
We'll be pushing out obviously the recordings and everything out pretty soon. Well, those who are watching and listening, they kind of are watching the recording, so it's kind of.
So there'll be another recording that we will push in the future.
Yes. But we are most likely going to have a pre-com summertime at some point for the BnP Weekly. Not yet though. So we have a few items and a few weekly shows still scheduled. But thank you for everybody watching and listening, and we'll be back within a week. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.